Okay, so for the final video set of what we're going to cover today, we're going to look at MATLAB's graphical user interface tool called Guide. Alright, so let's boot up Guide. So once we're in MATLAB, we can type in the command window Guide. And it'll take a second and it'll open this quick start menu. Now, you can open an existing GUI if you've started one in Guide, or you can open one of these previous templates. So in this case, we're going to start with a blank version, and I'll start by giving it a name, and I'm going to call it ColourPicker. Alright, so ColourPicker.fig. Now with a guide generated graphical user interface, you'll have two files. You'll have a .fig file and you will have a .m file. Now the .fig handles the layout of all the UI objects, and the .m file handles all the functions that run in the background. Alright, so we'll start this up, we'll click OK. Couple little dings and we're off. So this is what we are greeted with. We have this guide window, and it also opened in the background ColourPicker.m with a whole lot of generated code for us. Alright, so this is automatically generated, and it tells you which parts you can edit and which parts you can't. So we can see here, edit the text above to modify the response to help ColourPicker. So this is the H1 area and whatnot. So below this, it says begin initializing code. So this runs to initiate everything, and it says do not edit. So you can edit this stuff, but it will probably break things. If you sit down and work through it and work out exactly what's going on, you can change some of these, but generally it's not worth it. So it says end of initialization code, do not edit. So everything after here we can start editing. Alright, so let's look at some of these functions. So function ColourPicker underscore opening function, HObject, event data, handles, and variable argument in. So this function has no outputs, but this function is run when we first open the figure. Okay, so anything that we want to do when the figure is opened, we can put it inside of this function and it will get run. Okay, and it's already got a couple of lines here. So we look at the help to this function. HObject is the handle to the figure. Event data is reserved for event stuff. Handles is a structure with the handles and user data. So you'll see handles pop up a few times throughout this code, and what it is it's a structure of all available handles for graphical objects, and it's very, very helpful. Right, so when we need to reference other graphical objects that we've created, handles is what we refer to. Now, straight up, it choose default command line output for ColourPicker handles.output equals HObject. So just changing one of the structure fields inside of handles, and then we've got this update handle structure here. So this function GUI data takes two inputs, HObject and the handle structure. What it does is whenever we change handles, so if we want to change or add fields to it ourselves, which can be quite useful, and I'll explain in a second why, we must call this GUI data function. Okay, so just keep in mind that if you ever change the handle structure, you need to call this function to update so that everything else is aware that it's been updated. Okay. Scrolling down a little bit, ColourPicker output function. This is what outputs from this function are returned to the command line. So if we call ColourPicker.m from the command line and the graphical user interface does stuff, this function gets run when we close it, and anything that exists here or exists at the end and is passed to variable argument out will be the return from that figure. So sometimes this can be useful, especially if you're going to work with multiple figure windows. You can pass information between them. But look up the MATLAB help for more information on how to do that. And that is pretty much the entire default M file. It's quite brief because the GUI that we've made so far doesn't actually do anything. All right, so as we've talked about before, having a GUI that does something is quite useful. All right, so what I'm going to do for this session is start you on what your weekly lab is going to be. All right, what it's going to be is, we learned in previous videos that the way that colors are represented in MATLAB is by 3 normalized values. All right, and what we're going to do is create a little interface that shows us what values they are and allows us to use sliders and edit boxes to change what those values are, all right, and see what color we get out of it. And basically what we're going to need from that is a few sliders, a few edit boxes, and something that will display that color. Okay, so let's get started. Let's put in a few sliders. So that's going the wrong way. I think there's an orientation one here. Constructible slider, step, slider. No. See if we can delete this and create another one. If we drag, there we go. So if we drag one like that, we've got our first slider. Okay, so that's one. We need 3 channels. We need one for red. We need one for green. Actually, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to copy and paste so that they're all the same. 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to have them line up like so. Okay, so we've got some sliders, and we're going to need a edit box that is associated with those sliders. So make it about the same height, copy it, paste it, put it there so that they all align well, put a third one in, and there we go. So we've got most of what we need. The final thing that we're going to need is, I'm going to put an axis in. I'm just going to put it down here, and that's going to show which color it is. Right, we're going to have a text box that goes here with some static text in it. Copy, paste, and snap it to the left hand side. Now let's actually get started making some stuff. So I'll put another one up the top so we have a title. Go here, and yeah, so as we can see quite easily, we just select which UI objects we want, and we create them inside of this window, and that's what we get. So we click play on this. Activating will save changes. Yeah, don't show me this again. Cool. We get our color picker. It doesn't do anything yet. This figure window with the axes is still there, so we'll have to get rid of that and whatnot. So we've got some static text here, here. This edit text box, nothing does anything yet, but we've got that. Now, if we jump into our code, we can see that we're starting to get quite a lot of information going on in here. So this is the file as it was before, and we've created all of this other stuff. So we've got a new function. We've got slider2 callback, so obviously this is going to be run when slider2 is changed. Slider2 create function, slider4 callback, slider4 create function, slider5 callback, etc, 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 and for our few edit boxes. So we know that we're going to have to put in some information into these callbacks to handle whatever it is that we want to do. All right, so let's jump into here. I'm just going to change the text. So if I double click on one, we get UI inspector that we've had previously, and we'll change the string. So I'm going to call it ColourPicker with an exclamation mark. I'm going to change the font size up to something like 16. I'm going to make it bold, and that will do. Let's change this one to red. Size 12. It can also be, we want points. Points is the default units for text. Bold, size 12, and this time it's going to be green. And this final one is going to be 12, bold, and blue. Okay, so cool, we've got some text, we've got some layout, which is great, but we still aren't actually doing anything now. Exit mode, yeah. Xgrid is, no, we don't want Xgrid, we want to turn off those X and Y ticks and whatnot. So X tick is going to be nothing. So if we delete all of those and delete the Y ticks that go with it, we can delete. Now let's just see what this is going to cause. Yep, so we've now gotten rid of those. There's a black line there. Not too concerned about that right now. Okay, so let's get this guy doing something. Now, what we need to do is tie these two objects together. Okay, so in the callback for one, I'm going to need to edit the values for the other one. All right, so I'm just going to focus on red, and what your lab task this week is going to be is you complete green and blue, and I just do the red one for you. All right, so let's get into the red slider. So straight up, it's probably confusing as to the names of these objects. So something with guide is that it generates names for all the objects for you, and what they're based off of is this tag. So I'm going to update these tags as my first step. So red slider is going to be the name of the tag, and this one is going to be red edit. Okay, same thing for this guy. It's going to be green slider. This one is going to be green edit. Blue slider. And blue edit. Now always try and keep these sensible, because when I was talking about the handles struct before, so we look here, handles, which has the handles for all the objects that you have, it will be based off of these tags. So if you name it something sensible, it's a lot easier to find them. All right, so I'm going to save that, and this should update all these function names for me. So now it's quite easy to understand what's going to happen. All right, so let's have a look at our slider. So our slider is special. It's got a min value and a max value, which is the value when the slider is all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And it also has a slider step, which changes how much it changes by with a small press and a big press. So a small press is when you click on the arrow, a big press is when you click on the right hand side or the left hand side of where the button actually is. Alright, so because our colors are normalized between 0 and 1, I'm quite happy to have the min and max be 0 and 1. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, our red edit callback. So this is the function that's going to be run every time we click on this button. So what we need to do is whenever this button is called, we have to handle what needs to get changed. So when we click on this slider in either direction, we need to find out the current value of the slider. Then we need to update the edit text box associated with it, and then we need to change the color of the axes. So let's work out what the value is going to be. Now, HObject is going to be the self object. So red val is equal to HObject.value. Right, so value is the name of the field, and we can check that by going into our inspector and look at this value. So value will be the position along the slider that the bar actually is. All right, so that value is a number, which is fantastic. We've now stored that in red val. So what we need to do is update the text box. So red handles dot red edit dot. I'm hoping that this works. I haven't checked it. We need to set the string to equal num to str of red val. Alright, so let's save this and see how we go. So now when we run our figure, so we jump into this one and we click this, it doesn't seem to be working. Alright, so let's see what's going on. Let's see that, let's put a debug point in here and see what happens. So when we do this, it doesn't seem like our callback is being run at all. Oh, that's because I put that into red edit. I need to put that into red slider. That makes sense as to why it's not working. So I'm going to get rid of that and put it into red slider callback. Alright, so now when we run this, so when you want to run the figure, you can either run it from the text file or you can run it from the figure window. It doesn't really matter. Now you can see when we change this red slider position, it updates this red edit text box. Cool, but it wasn't changing the color yet. Alright, so we'll need to handle that case. What we need to do for that is work out what we can actually do to change this color. So let's open this guy, and I'm guessing there's going to be a background color somewhere. Alright, so color equals this. So I'm going to just change this manually and see what we get. So if we do that, and when we click run, yep, that changes the color. So it's just this color option that we need to change. Alright, and so to do that, handles dot, it's called axes 1. We can check that by jumping into this one. So axes 1, and if we click on it and go down to the tag, it's also called axes 1, and color is equal to red val. Alright, so now when we run this and change it, I'll go back and change what the default is. Ooh, I got an error. Ah, that's right. While setting color of a property of axis, color must be a 3 or 4 element vector. Because we only need to edit one of these values, not all of them. Alright, so the first position is red. Alright, so now I've changed that. I don't need to rerun this. But as you can see, as we change this, we get a different color. And because the default color wasn't white, it doesn't really make sense as what's going on. So we'll jump out of that. So go into this, we'll change the color, which is up here, to be white. And we'll now see what goes on when we run it. So when we run it, it's not white, it's not right. This guy. So that is now that. That's, there we go. So now it's right. So when we increase the red value, it goes from 0 to nothing. Alright, so because everything is currently set to be 1, that's the issue that we're having. So instead of it being a default of white, I'm going to set the default to be black. And black is going to be 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to start at 0, 0, 0. Right, so when we do this, it's black, and now when we increase this, it's getting more and more red, which is what we want. Okay. But when we change that value, nothing's happening. So let's jump onto that guy next. All right. So pretty happy with how this is currently working. Get out of that one, get out of this. We know that this update is working. Now what we want to do is change this red edit. So this gets called whenever we change the value inside of that text box and press enter. So what do we need to do? We need to take the value that's in the text box, and we need to change the color and also change the slider position. So red val is equal to to double of h object dot string. Now in the lecture I mentioned that the old syntax uses a get and set function. This is the new syntax, and I think it's much nicer. So string to double takes the string from the current edit box, turns it into a actual number, and then we need to update some of the other things. So handles dot red slider dot value is equal to red val, and then handles dot axes 1 dot color 1 is equal to red val as well. So adding those two lines, I don't have one running at the moment, so we'll run this. Starts off as black. Slider still works. Now we set this to 0, goes back to black, and moves the slider back as well. Go to 1, does that. Okay, so for your lab, what you need to do is change the default values of these edit texts, and also implement the green and the blue slider. So we can see that they don't do anything at the moment. All right, so that is the first task for your lab. The second task is going back to what we were working on previously, and that's to create the color pickup without using guide. So it's quite helpful to know how to use both. And yeah, so to get that final point for this week's lab, you need to be able to do both. Okay, so have fun with this one.